First of all, welcome to the Holy Land. Welcome to Israel. And we're very pleased to have you here. And we like to see some peace building, whether it's through culture and encounter or whether it's any other way, because we need some peace building over here. Yes, we're quite lacking in it, and it's important. Yeah, so the idea of going through culture and encounter is a very fine idea. I'm specifically very, very pleased to be here today at the Truman Institute for Advancement of Peace to give a lecture here. First of all, Harry Truman is one of my heroes, okay? I remember I was there in the 1948 election in the United States. I was 18 years old, and you can figure out from there, if you know any math, you can figure out how old I am now. But I was 18 years old. I think I already voted in that election. Yeah, because I was over 18 in 1948. And all the polls said that Thomas Dewey would win the election. And it's almost like the Clinton-Trump affair. The interesting thing about polls is that they always get it wrong, okay? And that wasn't the first time, it wasn't the last time that they got it wrong. And there was a wonderful picture of Harry Truman, of blessed memory, holding up a picture of the New York Daily News on Wednesday morning, and there was a big headline there, big fat headline, Dewey wins, yeah? And Truman was holding up this thing and a big smile all over, yeah? So he was a great man, and I think to a large extent he was a big, big friend of Israel, and I think to a large extent his recognition of the state of Israel, a de facto recognition of the state of Israel, immediately after the Independence Day, May 5th, 1948, that is, to a large extent, that's why we're here today, okay? So he's really one of my heroes. And I'm very, very pleased to be here because this institute has existed, the Truman Institute for the Advancement of Peace has existed for, I believe, 49 years, almost 50 years, half a century, okay? And this is the first time I've been invited to speak here, okay? So I'm very grateful to Professor Ottmar-Skeen for inviting me. And it's a real landmark. It's a real landmark because I have devoted my life to the study of the theory of games, as you just heard, and to a large extent, the most important agenda item in the theory of games is the matter of war and peace. Okay. War and peace. So I've to a large extent, I've devoted my life to peace building. So it's nice to be here at the Hebrew University, where I've been for even longer than the Truman Institute has been here. I've been here for well over 60 years. I've been teaching at the Hebrew University. So it's very nice, finally, to get an invitation to come here. Now, what I'm going to talk about is based in part on my Nobel lecture, which I gave in Stockholm over 11 years ago. And the The title of the lecture was War and Peace, because that's really what I think to be the most, maybe the most important part of my work. So the Nobel citation, the committee, the report of the Nobel Committee, which decided to give me and my colleague Thomas Schelling of blessed memory. He died a few months ago at over 90. The report of the committee starts with this sentence: wars and other conflicts are among the main sources of human misery. So I decided to devote my Nobel speech to that topic. Now, most attempts to bring about peace have been on a piecemeal, case-by-case basis. I should say that that's not the case over here, right? Over here we have, in this room, we have an attempt to approach the problem of bringing about peace by peace building through culture and encounter. So that's a general idea, okay? And maybe, sounds like it might be a good idea. I'll have something to say about that later. But most attempts to bring about peace is you get a conflict like North and South Ireland, and or Afghanistan and Russia, or Chechnya and Russia, or Hitler and the Western Allies in the Second World War, or the North and the South in the American Civil War. Yeah, and you try to resolve the problems that appear to be the basic problems that are causing this conflict or this disturbance. You try to address those problems on a case-by-case basis. And I'm not sure that is an efficient way to deal with it. In fact, I know it's not an efficient way to deal with it because it doesn't work. People have been fighting since the dawn of history. When I was a kid, history books used to be just a list of all the wars. Yeah, I think they've progressed beyond that a little bit. One talks a little bit about economics, about culture, and so on. But it used to be just a list of the wars, and the wars have been constant wars all the time. There was one exception, and that was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which lasted for 238 years. And we'll have a little more to say about that during the height of the Roman Empire and I think it was in the first few centuries of the first millennium. But other than that, people have been fighting since the dawn of history, all the time. And my suggestion is that in order to get peace, yes, don't have bright ideas for example, what you're doing over here, study and encounter, what's it called, culture and encounter, or trying to find out what it is in each case by case. You want to understand the root causes. Why do people go to war? So, like one studies disease. So, what I'm really suggesting is that if in order to get peace, what is peace? Peace is the absence of war. In order to get peace, you have to understand war. in order to get health, you have to understand disease, okay? Now, we don't have health research institutes. What we have is cancer research institutes, okay? That's what we have, cancer research institutes, heart disease research institutes, things like that. Cancer is the most, by the way. It's very popular. You try to understand the problem, okay? First, try to understand the problem. Afterwards, you can try to solve it. But first, try to understand the problem. That is the point. So I'm thinking, with all my admiration for Harry Truman, what I'm suggesting is that we change the name of this institute, yes? Not the Harry Truman Institute for the Advancement of Peace, but the Harry Truman Institute for the Study of War. Not how to make war, yes, but what causes war, all right? That's very, very important, all right? It's a totally different approach. Okay, peacemaking efforts are almost invariably based on compromise suggestions to settle a conflict, but not on the decision-making process. Okay? Now, it's very nice to suggest compromises, yes, but you have to, the parties to a conflict it's not enough to suggest a solution. The parties to the conflict have to be willing to accept that solution. Both parties, yes, to the conflict, or all parties. Yeah, often wars, not too often, but usually wars have two sides, yeah, not more. But all the parties to a war, in the Middle East it's different. In the Middle East, everybody fights everybody else. But in most of the world, parties, there are two sides to a war, and we have to see what is it that makes people reach decisions. Yeah. Now, how are decisions reached? And the answer is very, very simple. Decisions are reached by people when they think it is to their advantage to reach that decision. Okay? People who are involved in a conflict are not necessarily looking for peace. You talk to them that peace is a wonderful thing. No, they have a certain agenda. They want to. Let me read you something that I wrote in my Nobel speech. I talked about the American Civil War, okay? Now, the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln described that war in his second inaugural address, and what he said was as follows. In his second inaugural, toward the end of the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln said, both parties deprecated war, but one would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let the nation perish. And the war came. Okay? So we're talking about a process. You have to try to make it worthwhile. You have to give incentives to the sides to accept whatever it is that you are proposing, okay? It's the incentives that are important. You have to see whether the incentives you're giving are the right are the right incentives. You see, a rational decision maker, and most people are rational because they advance their own interests. That's what rationality means. They advance their interests based on their information. The key concept is rationality. And doing what you think is best for you. You have to look at the decision maker, not all the people, the decision maker, and you have to try to suggest to him doing something what is best for him. All right? That is that is the key. The key. You have to realize that people are advancing their own interests. They're not religious, okay? Or even if they are religious, but they are advancing their own interests. Okay? Now, let me tell you this. Rationality, the way I defined it here, doing what you think is best for you, is not something good. I'm not advocating it. I'm against it, okay? It's selfishness. It's selfish, and I try not to be selfish. I try to think about other people. So I'm not in favor of rationality. I'm against it, okay? But by and large, people do try to promote their goals, which by our definition means to be rational. So to understand our world, and more important, okay. I just wanted to make sure that that this is getting through. Okay, we should understand the workings of rationality, and that's what game theory is all about. Okay, game theory is about people who are rational. In other words, not that they think logically or anything like that, but they are people who try to advance their own goals, and they realize that other people are also advancing their own goals, okay? That's what game theory is about. I'm advancing my goals, and I know that you, the other side, are trying to advance your goals. That's a game. So now, can war be rational? Can strikes be rational? Can a war be, people get killed, by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, by the hundreds of thousands, by the millions, and property gets destroyed? Yes, billions of dollars worth of property, hundreds of billions of dollars. Yes. Can strikes be rational? Can suicide bombers be rational? How can it advance your goal to kill yourself? But the answer is yes, they can be. Okay? And we better realize that. We take all the ills of the world and dismiss them by calling them irrational. If they are rational, once we understand that they are, we can try to do something about it. But if we dismiss them, if we call them irrational, bad, irrational, then we can't do anything about it, okay? Now, let me try to what can we do about it? Well, if we realize that some of the ills of the world are rational, in other words, people are promoting their interest. Just like I read that quotation from President Lincoln's second inaugural address. Each side was promoting its interests by going to war. Okay, each side was promoting its interests by going to war, and once we understand that they are, we can try to do something about it. And what is it that we can do? And the answer is we can change the incentives. All right? Now, incentives is what people, what is an incentive, okay? An example of incentive is taxes. Okay, so when you try to get people to stop smoking, what is it that you can do about getting them to stop smoking? See, what you can do, or to stop drinking, for example, all right? What you can do, what the United States Congress did in the 1920s, so 90 years ago, to get people to stop drinking, is that they forbade the production of alcohol, of whiskey, of wine. It was forbidden to produce wine and whiskey and grappa and whatever you want. Yes, that didn't work too well. Okay, so nowadays it's considered even worse than alcohol. As cigarettes are considered. Yeah, cigarettes are considered very, very bad, and they are very bad for health. I mean, there's no question about it. But learning from the experience of I think it was the 20th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which forbade alcohol, learning from that experience and its failure, the government of the United States and the whole rest of the world followed suit, including Israel. And I don't know about Italy. Are cigarettes highly taxed in Italy or in Spain? Huh? Yes? Highly taxed. Okay, so what you do is you give a negative incentive to smoking. You say, all right, you want to smoke? Smoke. Kill yourself, okay? But pay for it, okay? You have to pay, and the tax on cigarettes can be more than what the cigarette costs, yes? 100%, 200%, and so on. On the other hand, you can give a positive incentive. You can say, I want people to invest in infrastructure, in companies, in commerce, in industry. So you say, okay, I lower the taxes on that. If you take money and invest it, then this will be taken off your income for the purposes of taxation. It'll be taxed at a much lower rate, and therefore people will take their money and they will invest it because they are being taxed much less. So you can give positive or negative incentives through taxes. Another example, which is perhaps the outstanding example in the world, is market economies, okay? Now we have market economies, and now they're almost in the whole world. I think the only remaining country in the world that is still socialistic is North Korea. I don't think there are any other countries in the world. Not China, not Vietnam, not Cuba, nothing, yes? All these countries have gone over to a market economy, and they have abandoned socialism. Now, what was wrong with socialism? Socialism is a beautiful concept. It's a beautiful philosophy. The philosophy is to each according to his needs, from each according to his ability. What could be nicer than that? People devote their lives to helping other people, yes. It's a beautiful concept. I subscribe to it entirely with both hands. There's only one little problem with it, one small problem. It doesn't work, okay? Now, why doesn't it work? What's wrong with it? It doesn't work because it gives the wrong incentives, okay? It gives the wrong incentives. Why? To each according to his needs. So people say, I'm not going to work. Yeah, I have needs. I have to eat. I have to sleep. I have to have a house. I have to have nice clothes. Okay? I have needs. Okay? Give me my needs. Okay? And from each according to his ability. So people, they can work, they can build, they can be carpenters, they can be professors of mathematics, they can be everything. But why should they bother? Yes? Why do it? Because you're going to get something anyway, yes? And that is what happens to socialist economies. I was in Vietnam in '06, and this is a thriving economy. But it wasn't always. I mean, it was in 1986, 20 years before I was there, the Vietnamese people were on the verge of starvation. Because nobody was working, yes? Nobody was doing anything. Because you would get, whatever there was, you would get even without working. And if you worked, you wouldn't get what you worked for. So people were starving. There's no incentive to work. So incentives is what makes the world turn around, all right? That is the most, incentives are that's why people do what they do, because they have an incentive to do. It's the most fundamental concept in not only in economics but in everything that you do. So I want to look at incentives for peace. What are the incentives for peace? If I want peace, okay, then I want to give people incentives. I want to give people incentives to not to go to war, to refrain from going to war. So what could be the incentives for peace? Oh, concessions. You have some kind of conflict between two sides, and maybe you make concessions to the other side. Maybe that'll make them want to make peace with you, right? Well, we can think what we think about that, but it doesn't seem to make too much sense, okay, that concessions would make the other side love you or refrain from attacking you. But, maybe, but let's look at history. Let's look at history. It's true that I'm a theorist, but empirical economics is also important. Let's look at Munich, 1938. Okay, Germany, Hitler, had been violating one agreement after the other during the 30s. And then in 1938, he said he wants a part of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland. He wants that. And Daladier, the Premier of France, and Chamberlain, the Premier of England, and Chamberlain was a senior partner in that partnership, went to Munich to negotiate with Hitler about this. So they asked him, young man, is this your last demand? You've been making demands again and again and again. Is this your last demand? So Hitler said, yes, it's my last demand. They said, sign this piece of paper that it's your last demand. Okay? So he signed. Okay? Chamberlain went back to London, and he approached the House of Commons, and he said, gentlemen, there was only one lady in the House of Commons at the time, only one. So he said, lady and gentlemen, okay? I have brought with me peace in our time. But actually, what he brought was war. And not only in his time, but in a year and a half, 18 months. Okay? 18 months later, Hitler invaded Poland. And let me tell you a story about that. When Hitler invaded Poland, the British Parliament hesitated. The government, not the Parliament, the government hesitated how to respond. Chamberlain was against going to war even at that time. And the government said to Chamberlain, Mr. Chamberlain, if we don't go to war now, then you're not the Premier of England, and we go to war anyway. That's what everybody said to him. And the whole government, yes. And so he capitulated, and England decided to go to war. And they telegraphed, there was no email at the time, and I think not even long-distance telephones. They telegraphed the British ambassador in Berlin, his name was Henderson, and they said to him, please inform the Germans that we are at war. Now, that's not modern anymore. At that time, there were declarations of war and beautiful banners and things like that, but all kinds of formalities. We don't do that anymore. When people go to war nowadays, they go to war. They don't declare anything. But at that time, there was a declaration of war, and Henderson went to von Ribbentrop, who was the foreign minister of Germany, and said to him, I have the honor to inform you that my country is at war with yours. Now, von Ribbentrop immediately phoned Hitler and told him this. And Hitler was furious. He said, they cheated me. They cheated me. Chamberlain cheated him by agreeing to the Munich agreement. He cheated him because he gave him a very clear signal that he could do any outrage he wanted, anything he wanted, he could do, and Britain would not respond. And if he had known that Britain would go to war, he would not have invaded Poland at that time. I'm not saying that World War II would not have happened, because Hitler was, although he was rational, he was also crazy, yes. But not really rash. I mean, the invasion of Russia was a highly irrational act. It couldn't advance his interests. But also, not following up after Dunkirk, he should have gone into Britain immediately. That was also irrational, not following up. But, okay, so Hitler was both crazy and also irrational. But in this, he was rational. He was responding to his incentives. He was responding to the signals he was getting, okay? So concessions don't work. They give the wrong signal. They give a signal of weakness, and weakness invites aggression. Weakness invites aggression. Concessions give a signal of weakness, and weakness invites aggression. Let me tell you a story. When my grandchildren reach the age of 15 or so, I take them on a trip abroad, okay? And we like to go hiking in the mountains. So when one of my grandchildren was 15, this is many years ago, I went to the mountains of eastern California with him. And we trekked there for a couple of weeks. And we trekked there in the wilderness. Eastern California is beautiful country. The Sierra Nevada, there's also Sierra Nevada in Spain, but my Sierra Nevada is in Eastern California. So lakes, mountains, beautiful, and bears. Okay? Bears. So we were walking along the trail, and my grandson says to me, "Grandpa, I wish we would see a bear." We've been walking for 2 or 3 hours already, 4 hours maybe. I wish we would see a bear. So within 10 minutes we see a bear. And we hadn't seen one before at all. He's standing right on the path, and he's looking at us. And we look at him. So I say to Davidi, to my grandson, I say, "Don't turn your back. Don't turn your back, and God forbid that you should run away. Yes? Don't turn your back, just stand, don't go forward, and look at the bear. Because he's more afraid of you than you are of him." Okay? If you turn your back, you send him a signal that you are prey. And he is a predator, and he can run faster than you. Believe me, he can run faster than you. And you send him the signal that you... So don't turn your back. And we both stood there and looked at the bear, and he looked at us. So I wasn't really afraid because I was following instructions, yes. And the bear may have been afraid or not afraid. Anyway, he gets up after a few minutes and he walks away, and we continue our hike. Now, people are no different from bears. You give them a signal of weakness. You show them that you are prey, they will run after you. They will attack you. So concession, not a good idea. How about disarmament? So let's go to history again. When I was and I used to go to the United States often, and during the many years of the Cold War, there were a lot of student agitation for disarmament. I remember seeing a bumper sticker which said, "One nuclear explosion could ruin your whole day." Yes. This was, of course, meant to be amusing, but it was a part of a drive for unilateral disarmament. Fortunately, the government of the United States, whether it was Republicans or Democrats, everybody knew that disarmament, unilateral disarmament, would be disaster. Disaster. Yeah. And the result was that the United States and the Soviet Union did not disarm, and the United States had B-24 bombers in the air carrying nuclear weapons 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and in leap years 366, for 40 years. 40 years in the air. That's what kept the peace. That's what kept the Cold War from going hot. Okay? You have to have the right incentives. The incentives for both sides in the Cold War was not to let the Cold War go hot. All right? And that incentive was that kept both sides from attacking each other. Okay, it worked. It worked. We're here. I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yes? I thought the world would end in 3 weeks. The world would end in 3 weeks. Okay? It didn't. It didn't because of the nuclear weapons. And I think the intelligent one over there was Khrushchev, not Kennedy. Kennedy was a brinkmanship. Let me tell you a little bit about Switzerland. Who's Swiss? Is there anybody Swiss over here? No Swiss? We have Italians, we have Spanish, South Americans, no Swiss? Okay. I was in Switzerland last summer, again with a different grandson, not in Eastern California, but in Switzerland, with a different grandson. And we were hiking there in the mountains, with a jet plane screaming overhead, Swiss Air Force, jet planes, fighter planes. So my grandson says to me, Grandpa, just like the first one with the bears, this one says, Grandpa, what are those fighter planes there for? I said, that's the Swiss Air Force. Okay. So he says to me, the Swiss have been at peace for 400 years. Why do they need fighter planes? Okay. So I said, that's what brought them to peace for 400 years. 400 years of peace, armed to the teeth. Okay? Switzerland was the only country in World War II, in Europe, that did not succumb to Hitler. Okay? Armed to the teeth. You go around in Switzerland, you see holes in the mountains where they keep their ammunition, even today. Okay? You have to give incentives for peace. Okay? You have to make it not worthwhile for the other side to attack you. I'll give you another example. This was not with a grandson, but I was snorkeling in Eilat, in the Red Sea, in the south of Israel. I was snorkeling, and they have over there what's called a lionfish. Among the fish that it's beautiful to snorkel there. They have a lionfish, and the fish, the other fish, when you swim around, they swim away. The lionfish just sits there. It just sits there. Why? Because he has tentacles which are poisonous. Okay? He doesn't need to swim away. He's not afraid of you. He says, "Nole me tangere." Don't touch me, yes? You want to touch me? It's your problem, okay? So people don't touch him, and he's there. This is how nature works. And it's how human society works. I mentioned before the Pax Romana. The Pax Romana, as I said, lasted for 238 years. And what made the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, the world was at peace, the longest time that the Western world was ever at peace. I said in the introduction to my talk, the Western world has been, not the Western world, the whole world, China, India, everything, anything you want. They've been fighting since the dawn of civilization, and even before that. But the Pax Romana was a period of peace. What brought about this period of peace? So the Romans had a proverb. This is in Latin. Si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Okay? Now this is and they got it, yeah? They got it. They were prepared for war for 238 years, and then they let it go, and of course the barbarians came in and overran them, and that was the end of it. But as long as they were prepared for war, they did not have to fight. The atomic weapons, tanks, airplanes, infantry, ships, guns, artillery, all those things, they exist in order not to be used. Okay? Everything else exists in order to be used. They exist in order not to be used. Barack Obama, the previous president of the United States, got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009. And what he said in his peace speech was the belief that peace is desirable is rarely enough to achieve it. It's not enough to shout peace, peace, okay? That's not enough. It doesn't bring peace. Yes, it does not bring peace. He was a smart kid, and he knew what he was talking about because in his administration was the longest period of uninterrupted war in the United States history. So he knows what he's talking about. I think I should finish because I'm approaching the 3/4 of an hour mark. So let me just say this. Stick and carrot, okay? When you are trying to get a mule to go, then you can beat him with a stick, that's a negative incentive, or you go, otherwise I'll hit you, or you can give him a carrot to encourage him to it's a positive incentive, like positive incentives for investment that we were talking about. So the stick is, we are talking about nole me tangere, we're talking about signaling, music, Munich, Korea I forgot to talk about, but we don't have time. Maybe in the discussion I'll talk about it. Predictability. You want to be able to say, if you do such and such, I will do such and such, and to make that credible, that people will believe you, okay? And you have to give the right incentives to the right people. So you don't punish a whole country. You punish the decision makers, not everybody in sight. Okay? And those are negative incentives. Positive incentives are economic incentives, the Marshall Plan. I mean, after World War I, Germany was punished, and that led to World War II. After World War II came the Marshall Plan. Germany was helped economically, was rebuilt economically. Education, which is the subject of this talk, and culture and encounter people if they know each other. I think this is maybe okay, but if they know each other, they're less likely to kill each other, but I'm not even sure about that. So I will say toda rabah, thank you very much.